We welcome you back to the Bell Ringers podcast. Ben Goldstein joined with Sam Heine. Different guest we got today, but Sam, welcome on in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Really good Phillies season, and I'm excited to talk about it as we head into Red October, our favorite time of the year.
Yeah, it is. It's an exciting time. I was down there on Sunday. I was sitting next to this guy today. He hasn't been to a Phillies game since opening day 2004. He was 6. He said he lived in Lancaster, and this guy had so much bottled up energy. It was just like this dude was on like a different planet. And he was like cursing. There were kids all around us. It was tough. I think he was hoping he would get kind of a Red October playoff atmosphere. However, this game on Sunday meant nothing, and he really, at least he didn't get that from me because I was watching the Eagles game on my phone. So kind of a tough one for him to come to. They get the win Sunday. They win the series over Minnesota, but those last two games kind of summarizes a bit what's been going on over the last week or so. And it's just struggling offense and not great bullpen pitching.
Yeah, it's crazy because the talk just last week was about how hot this team is going to be going into the playoffs, and they're peaking at the right time. And then ever since they kind of clinched out there on the West Coast, it just seems like they've kind of taken their foot off the gas a little bit. And hopefully it's just that. They didn't have much to play for. Obviously, they still were alive for that one seed, but there was an off chance they were going to get it. So hopefully they're just taking their foot off the gas. But I guess we'll see if it turns into reality next week.
Yeah, I mean, with how the last couple of years have gone, going into a playoff like this typically doesn't feel great. I mean, we all remember how they went in last year. Really not ideal. But this time around, they played a good second half of the year. Just kind of this last week has not been great. And we'll touch on some specific guys. I want to start with Harrison Bader, who was electric in his entire time, kind of from when he was traded to Philadelphia till about a week ago. And over his last 7 games, he's slashing 154, 158, 154. Not ideal from a guy who's been your spark plug in center field.
Yeah, that's not what you want from Bader. I mean, I think with him, though, the high was always so high. When he came over, it was kind of seen as not a huge bat addition, which is crazy for how well that he's been hitting since he came over here. But when it was traded for, a lot of people said that it was kind of an underwhelming move by Dave Dombrowski because they weren't going to really get that kind of impact bat. And obviously Bader came over here and had become the best hitter on the team for a few weeks at stretch there. So I think he's just coming down to more of the reality a little bit here. I'm not fully worried about him going into the playoffs, but I do think that what we saw from him in the beginning of when he came over here, obviously isn't historically who he's been as a player that high. And if you're going to have the expectation that he's going to be that 340 hitter, hitting bombs and just kind of getting up and making things happen every time at the plate. That's just not who he's been over his career. He's an obvious upgrade from the other guys we've had in center field from an offensive standpoint. But I think he's just returning to the mean a little bit. And, maybe with a week off, he'll be able to get it going when the playoffs start again.
Yeah, Phillies will have an inter-squad game on Wednesday where fans will be attending. I will be in the building on Wednesday, so looking forward to that. It doesn't concern you at all with Bader. This is kind of like ever since he started getting hot, it was when this Phillies offense started to turn it on a little bit. And when he kind of gets cold, the rest of the offense does. Or is that just another thing where the Phillies all get hot together and they all go cold together?
No, I definitely am a little bit concerned on Bader. Just like I was saying, I think, when he came over, it was just such a high that wasn't really expected. So like I said, I think he's kind of returning to the mean of what he's been his whole career. Obviously, he's not a 150 hitter throughout his whole career, but when we traded for him originally, we didn't have these expectations that he was going to come in and be a real impact bat. And we were all kind of disappointed, or at least a lot of people were disappointed in the move because they didn't think that they got an impact bat. So I guess we're just kind of seeing a little bit more now of what Harrison Bader actually is as a player instead of that really hot stretch that he's had. But look, it obviously is concerning that he hasn't been playing that great because the Phillies are going to need him. These guys, we know how hot and cold they can be in that lineup, and we need production coming from the outfield, especially with some of the other guys we have out there platooning over in right field who aren't exactly great offensive producers. So, this lineup can get very short very quickly, and but not very deep or very shallow very quickly. So hopefully he can get it going. But yeah, it's definitely a little bit concerning that he's kind of dropped off to back to where he's kind of expected to be.
Yeah, so you mentioned guy in right field. I'm not even talking about Nick Castellanos. We talk about Nick Castellanos way too much on this podcast that we're not even going to touch on him today. Max Kepler, 125, 160 on base over his last 7 games. He did hit a home run Sunday. He is slugging pretty well. But this is just kind of what we've seen from Kepler all year. Like, he just straight up has not been productive in kind of any aspect. And this is continuing now going into the playoffs. Is this just what we're used to now? Like, is this just who Kepler is?
Yeah, I think today kind of shows who Kepler is. He has the ability to pop one. If he gets a hold of it, he has that ability. And I think that's something that Thompson kind of leans on a little bit too much, is that he's got that home run capability because, at this point, I mean, Castellanos, I don't even remember the last time he hit a home run. So the fact that Kepler does have a little bit of power, I think is something that keeps him being in the lineup. And obviously Castellanos just struggles as well. But yeah, it's just what it is with Kepler. I mean, he's been a good player throughout his career, but he just has been untrustworthy this whole season. I think, when Bader got here and things started getting hot, and, Trey was on that hot streak and Schwarber was hitting really well, like, everyone was just playing really well. And then now everyone's kind of going back to what they were before. And, Kepler's one of those guys that I have no faith in, playing in the playoffs. And he's going to get at bats against right-handed pitching. We know that. And, you just got to hope that he gets a hold of one like he did today. But yeah, he's somebody that I'm not going to rely on in the playoffs at all. And definitely, it is what it is at this point. It was a bad signing and unfortunate, but something we're going to have to fix next off season, I guess.
Yeah, but the other guy you got that you can use out there is Nick Castellanos. So it's like you're kind of in a tough spot in right field. The Phillies are going to continue this platoon thing in right field. It's just going to happen. You're going to get Kepler against the right-handers. You're going to get Castellanos against the left-handers. And whoever's hitting that spot, you're probably going to be disappointed with at the end of the day. And, it's how this team is. So it is what it is. Marsh as well, 211 average over his last 7 games. And then JT Realmuto has been struggling for a while. 178 average with a 260 on base over his last 30 games. He was hitting very well up until late August, early September, and then just kind of went cold as we see here. And then Schwarber as well, kind of a little bit on the underground, 179 average and a 258 on base over his last 7 games. Only hit a couple homers, a homer, one, maybe 2 over that last week, which is, we're so used to him popping it off, and it looked like he was going to break that Ryan Howard record, ultimately fell short at 56. So those are 3 pretty hefty guys that are going into the postseason not hitting well.
Yeah, I think JT would probably be the one that I'm most concerned about, just because I feel like Thompson always likes to use him in that 4-hole. Obviously, since Bohm has come back, he's been hitting in that 4-hole, but if Thompson is going to put JT there, I mean, he just can't be the 4-hole hitter, in my opinion. He, like you said, his numbers, and he's just really struggled offensively this year. He didn't have a great year offensively last year, and even defensively, there's a lot of metrics out there about, I don't know how much you want to get into framing pitching and stuff like that, but he's been really bad behind the dish as well, in that aspect. So it's just not been a great year for JT overall with some of that stuff, especially offensively. And he's probably the one because they're going to rely on him no matter what. If we like it or not, Thompson's going to put him up there towards the top of the lineup. And God forbid if he's in that 4-hole trying to protect Bryce. I mean, why would you ever pitch to Bryce when you have JT there? So yeah, he's probably the one that I'm most concerned about. Marsh, I kind of settled in. I think he's had a really good year. Ben, obviously over 300 since May. We've seen those stats for the last couple of months. They've always put those out. I think what you get from him at this point and anything else from those outfield guys, it's just kind of extra. Not that they're not going to be relied on, but when they're down towards the bottom of that order, it's obviously not as important that they're getting on and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think JT is definitely my biggest concern, but yeah, like you said, it's not good to have all of these guys in a real slump going into the playoffs and then also going into the bye because, you mentioned that they're going to have that inner squad, but they're not really going to have seeing a lot of live pitching over the next few days to get themselves, seeing pitches and stuff like that. So hopefully that they just wake up. It's playoff time. They turn it on, but not a good way to enter the playoffs for sure.
Yeah, and a little bit more. Let's touch on JT a little bit because he's aging. Obviously, not as great behind the plate anymore. Of course, the last month has not been great at the plate. He's due for a contract this year, and the Phillies are going to have to give it to him because they have no other option at catcher unless they're going to have to go out and get someone from the outside. And really, where are you going to get that from? Yeah. JT, like, how much are the Phillies going to overpay him? Like, it's going to be a hefty deal for JT just because of who he is.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, I wouldn't want to give JT anything more than like a 2-year deal. He's so durable, and he still is really good at throwing runners out, obviously. But yeah, his bat has just really not been there. And of course, catchers across the league, they're not really. If you look at catchers across the league, there's not a lot of great hitting catchers. Obviously, Cal Raleigh is the one exception to the rule. But if you just look across the league, there's not really a ton of great hitting catchers. But even still, JT has that reputation as somebody who should be a great hitting catcher. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you because, Ohapi a couple of years ago, they traded away. I know they have some kid that they like down in the minors, but he's way too far away to come up even close to next year, next couple of years. And like you said, I mean, unless we're going to rely on Rafael Marchand and, Garrett Stubbs is a free agent, if you even wanted to go down that path, obviously none of us want to. So they're going to have to give him a contract. But, yeah, I agree with you. I think at the end of the day, it's going to end up looking like an overpay. And that's just the situation they put themselves in with drafting and developing over these last couple of years before Dombrowski got here.
J2 Muto is 34. This season, he finished with a 257 average, a 315 on-base percentage, and a 699 OPS, including 12 home runs, 52 RBIs, 8 stolen bases. So, I mean, it'll be interesting what that looks like. And, could the Phillies go another route? No. Like, this is kind of their only option. And it's because of how previous things have gone. So, I mean, let's look back at last year. And Phillies go into the postseason. They're a 500 team in the second half. That week prior, they're probably a little bit in a worse situation than these Phillies are in. Phillies finished this season 96-66, 1 win better than that team. But going into this, Phillies were playing well. Last year, Phillies playing terribly. Some of the worst baseball of the year was being played in September, and it transferred over into the postseason. Obviously, they lose in the first round to the Mets. And the hitting was horrible. The bullpen was not very good. 22, they're going into the playoffs very bad. However, they turn it on after the ninth inning against the Cardinals in Game 1. Things start to roll for them. All the wheels fall off after Game 3 of the World Series. NLCS games 6 and 7 at home, offense just disappears. When I look at past history, Sam, I'm not feeling too good. I'm not feeling great about an offense that's going in a little stagnant, and them not continuing, especially with 6 days of not playing any games. This concerns me.
Yeah, and when you look at it too, you can obviously take it on a little bit of a deeper level. Bryce Harper hasn't had the year that he's had in the past. He's had a good year, but not really one of those great Bryce Harper years that we've seen in the past. And, I have no doubt that he's not going to turn it on in the playoffs. I think he's obviously going to be and have a good playoffs for us. But, that's obviously a little bit of a concern going in. Trey Turner, obviously won the NL batting title today, which is great for him, first Philly to do it with Richie Ashburn, like in the 50s, I think. But he's obviously coming back from that hamstring injury. He got 2 at-bats today. But, how much less pitching is he going to see over this next week? And then it's a lot of the same guys. Like, it's just a lot of the same guys that we've just relied on these last couple of years that have just come up short. 22 is obviously a magical run, but they decided to get rid of Reese. They decided to move Bryce to first, and that's fine. But you miss the home runs, and I think something that's not being talked about enough going into this postseason is that the Phillies just don't hit a ton of home runs. Obviously, they had 8 the other night. But, besides Schwarber, there's not a lot of guys with high home run totals on this team. So, normally in the playoffs, everyone in Philly hates it because they think that's why we lost the World Series in 2022. Live by the home run, die by the home run. But a lot of teams that hit the most home runs in the playoffs, they end up being teams that win games and series. So, that's something that concerns me going into the playoffs. But yeah, I think, over the last couple of years, though, I still feel probably better about this team than I did obviously last year's team. Last year was a really bad ending to the season. I would say this year in 2023 are probably pretty comparable about how confident I feel going into the playoffs. 23 is definitely the most confident just because of how the playoffs went the year before, not even the way that they played in the regular season, because even that regular season they were struggling and then had that great August. But so I feel good about them going to the playoffs, but you'd be a fool to not be worried about the offense. I mean, it's the thing that's killed them the last couple of years, and I think if anything's going to kill them again, that's what it's going to be.
Trey Turner got in for 2 at-bats on Sunday after 18 days on the IL and clinched the batting title. 304 average, only National League hitter to be over 300, which is kind of crazy. Lowest batting title ever in the National League. So kind of interesting. He's the 9th Philly to do it ever. Billy Hamilton did it twice in 1891 and 93. Ed Delahanty in 1899. Sherry McGee in 1910. Lefty O'Doul, it's an interesting name, in 1929. The Chuck Klein in 1933. Richie Ashburn in 55, 58, and then Trey Turner in 2025, excuse me. Those are some names.
Yeah, those are definitely some big names in Phillies history. Some of them you recognize, some of them you don't. But yeah, it's cool for Trey. His second National League batting title of his career, which is pretty cool. And, when we signed Trey Turner after the 2022 World Series loss, that was obviously our biggest need was that shortstop. And he's definitely been the best one in that class. Xander, Dansby, I'm blanking on who the other shortstop was in that class besides Trey. But, Dombrowski made a good move. He got the best one. Obviously Trey struggled a little bit in the beginning of his Phillies tenure, but this is the Trey Turner that we were promised. He was great on defense this year. Obviously, great on offense as well, winning the batting title. I think his power wasn't what we quite expected this year. A little bit down on the power numbers, but I think that contributed to him learning from the last couple of seasons and actually taking the approach that everyone kind of preached in the off season of taking what the pitcher gives you. You live and die with singles and doubles, and obviously he hits some triples as well, and not trying to lift the ball all the time and be that true leadoff hitter that we've always needed on this team. So big props to Trey for really taking that approach to heart and following through with it all year. Because some of these guys, they did it for the first month and then they just went back to their old habits. But Trey really stuck through it throughout this whole season, and it paid off for him with the batting title.
Let's talk about 3 of the biggest names in this bullpen that have been struggling pretty mightily over the last couple games. We'll start with kind of the one that is the least important, maybe going into the postseason. Orion Kirkering, his last 12 innings, he's allowed 13 hits, 7 runs, 6 walks, and he has a 5.25 ERA with a 1.58 WHIP. Yes, Sunday he did pitch his way out of the 10th inning against the Twins, which was big, led to that Phillies win. But I mean, these numbers are concerning for a guy that should be in the back end of your bullpen in the playoff, regular season, whatever.
Yeah, and the thing with Kirkring, too, is that he's struggled in the playoffs over his career. His rookie year, obviously, he was catapulted up the system all the way up and then really struggled in the playoffs. He struggled in the playoffs last year as well. He's just somebody that even in the regular season, I just don't have a lot of faith in him. I think it's tough when you're, a guy that doesn't really use a lot of pitches because, coming up, obviously, his slider was just the pitch that everyone was talking about, and it is devastating when it's on. But if you're going to only have a few pitches, it's easy to sit on it. And if it's not biting, it's not biting. And, guys can sit on that pitch and just wait for it. And, again, he's not been somebody who has really showed up in the postseason. He's been somebody who has really struggled. So, yeah, they don't have a lot of good righty options out of that bullpen either. So, it's just him not really living up to what he was promised to be coming up, and obviously being, like I said, catapulted through the system so fast is definitely a disappointment. And I think he's a big reason why David Robertson's even here. Why we need bullpen help, but they went right and got a right-handed pitcher, and I think Kirkman's a big reason why that Robertson is here, and I think that Robertson's probably going to take some of his innings this postseason. And every time Kirkman's on the mound, we're all going to be holding our breath because he just seems to give up a run every single time he's in there. And yeah, he's definitely makes me really nervous going into the playoffs.
Do you think him being rushed through the system and being caught up at the end of 23 and getting those playoff innings kind of not deteriorated him, but messed up something mentally or physically?
I think it can go both ways because you see it a lot with some guys who come up really quickly, who are talented enough to come up really quickly, and they're able to just play at the big league level. But I think, baseball, obviously, more than any other sport, it does lend itself to being in the minors and developing pitches. And it's hard to be in the major leagues and develop new pitches. That's something that's obviously going to be in the off season, and that's something that I would love to see from him. And coming up through the minors, maybe they could have gotten some more stuff into his arsenal. And I kind of excuse away his first postseason just because he came up so quickly. But I mean, it's too late now to really factor that in. I mean, he's been pitching in the majors long enough now, but I do think sometimes if guys do get just kind of sped up really quickly through the system, they don't have enough time to develop some of their stuff and struggle in the minors. Like we see, Nick Abel for example. I mean, he's somebody who has struggled in the minors, and then obviously he's made himself into a good pitcher, and we saw that the other night. And some of these guys, there's a reason that it takes levels in the minor leagues. And like I said, some guys are just ready to come up. Paul Skeens, I mean, Wyatt Langford a couple years ago with Texas. Like some of these guys just get thrown in there and they can really succeed, but some guys need to have that development. And I think I think you're right. I think Kirkman definitely could have used a little bit more time to develop and see if he can develop a third or fourth pitch and see if he could hone in that slider a little bit more and make the fastball a little, all that kind of stuff, and just sharpen his tools a little bit more. So yeah, I definitely think that could be a factor.
You mentioned David Robertson. His last 13 innings have not been pretty either. 14 hits, 7 runs, 6 walks, and he's got a 4.85 ERA, a 1.54 whip. Over his last 6 innings, he has a 7.5 ERA and a 2 whip. 40 years old, and it's kind of starting to look like it a little bit. And I mean, this week should help, but we haven't seen him pitch as many innings as he once was, kind of when he first came over, and then he started taking longer, days in between, and it just hasn't looked good.
Yeah, and Robertson, going back to 22, obviously he was a part of that team that went to the World Series, but he was a tightrope. He was walking a tightrope, and every time he was out there, I mean, remember Game 1 of the World Series down there in Houston? JT hits that monster home run in extra innings, and we take the lead, and we had come all the way back in that game, and then Robertson got super lucky. I believe it was like a strikeout to end it in like the dirt or something like that. But he had allowed some base runners, and the whole postseason, every time he would come in, everyone was super scared. And he pitched well for Texas last year, obviously, and he's somebody who has so much experience in the postseason that he's somebody that you can at least trust that they're not going to be, the moment's not going to be too big for him. I mean, he was on the 2019 Yankees World Series team that beat the Phillies. I mean, that's just insane. Like that is I can't even fathom. Like that is so long ago that he was on that team, but he was on that team, and so it's not that he has a lack of postseason experience, but he's old. And yeah, I think this whole bullpen is really nerve-wracking. I know obviously we're going to talk about the big dog in the ninth probably next, but even like Strahm, he makes me nervous. He's been kind of up and down this year, and not the whole Alvarado thing. Obviously, I'm sure you guys have talked about it on this podcast, but him with the steroids and all that really just kind of screwed everything up, and not having that big arm to come in, because Alvarado was that guy that Thompson would throw him in the 6th inning if he needed to. He'd throw him in the 8th inning. He was so good at just moving in and coming in whenever you needed him, and not having him for this playoffs is going to be huge. And, hopefully this bullpen can really hold it down this year. Because last year, as much as the offense was a big problem and a big reason why we lost that series, the bullpen was just as much to blame.
Strom is actually someone I have confidence in. His last 14 and a third, he's got a 1.26 ERA. Like, he hasn't allowed a ton of base runners, doesn't very rarely allows runs. Like, he has been one of the more reliable guys for the Phillies, I feel, over the last month or so. And then another guy, Tanner Banks. Tanner Banks might be my favorite player on the team. That guy just comes in. He's a stone cold killer, that guy. He comes in, bases loaded, and he's able to just work his way out of it. I don't know how he does it, but he's got some dark magic. And Juan Duran had some dark magic when he first came over. And ever since he blew that save against the Dodgers on the night that the Phillies won the division, he's blown once since. He's thrown 5 innings since. He's allowed 6 hits, 3 runs, and 2 homers. He has not been great as of then. He's been very shaky. He allows a lot of base runners. And, it's just classic Phillies closing, it seems like. When you finally got a guy who's like, all right, this is a guy that's going to lock it down. It's just anytime a guy's coming into a game with just like a 1-run lead in the 9th, he's wearing red pinstripes, I'm nervous. It's just how it is.
Yeah, I think Duran goes all the way back to that Mets game that he blew when they were just kind of teeing off on him a little bit. And, I think the thing with him, and I know a lot of people have talked about this, is that, sometimes you've got to waste pitches. You have such good stuff, and, your fastball is going to blow by a lot of guys. But I think back to the Francisco Alvarez at bat at home versus the Mets when he was pitching, and, he let up some base runners, and Alvarez was up with a chance to take the lead. And he threw him a nasty, I think it was a fastball and just 2 curveballs in the dirt. And Alvarez had no chance at it because he was waiting on that fastball to come at him. And, I think Duran, he just gets into these modes where he thinks that his stuff is good enough to just blow by you, even if it's an 0-2 pitch. And, sometimes it's okay to throw a ball. It's okay to spike one a little bit. You got JT back there. And, while I talked about JT's framing not great, he's still a great defensive catcher and a great blocker. And, I know that the one game he blew, he gave up the home run and the 0-2 fastball that he just grooved. And those guys still are major league hitters. Excuse me. So, 102, 103, obviously a lot of guys aren't going to be able to catch up to that. But if it's predictable and if it's down the middle, I mean, people are going to be able to hit it. So I just think that sometimes he's got to use that curveball more. I think that he's been a little bit reluctant to use it recently for whatever reason. And, if he gets to these counts where he's 0-2, 1-2, it's okay to, throw a ball in the dirt or throw a ball high and see if they'll chase. Like, you don't have to be perfect every time. And, your stuff is good enough to try to get guys to chase. But yeah, I think he's definitely gone into a little bit of a nervous category for me. When he first came over, I mean, holy moly, it was 1, 2, 3 every time, lights out. But that's just how it is with closers too. Not everyone's going to be like that every time. But I mean, he's given up more home runs as a Philly than he did as a Twin so far this season, which obviously is not a good sign. So I'm not exactly sure 100% what's going on, but yeah, what I talked about him not, wasting some pitches and trying to get guys to chase a little bit more is definitely something I think he should do.
Well, hopefully he'll be able to do that in the postseason,
because it's crazy, like
the playoffs, like.
It's crazy. Like he has the best stuff of any closer in the league right now, but he doesn't strike a lot of guys out. Like, it's crazy. You would think with that kind of stuff that he would just be, really a really high strikeout guy. And even going back to Minnesota, he wasn't a huge strikeout guy, but with that kind of stuff, he should definitely be striking more batters out. So I think hopefully that's something that he can do as the postseason moves on.
Well, with the Twins back when they made the playoffs, I think 23, he was really good in that wild card series, and then I think he had like one more appearance in the DS. But when he was in the playoffs, he pitched well. So hopefully that'll continue with the Phillies, and it'll have to come against either the Reds or the Dodgers in the National League Division Series. They will face off against each other, Cincinnati and Los Angeles, in the wild card series. Every game, we're all staying up late. 9:08 first pitch for games 1 and 2 and maybe 3 if that happens. Reds have won 7 of the last 10. Dodgers have won 8 of the last 10. And these are two teams that I think the Phillies match up somewhat well against. They split the season series with the Reds. They won that series against the Dodgers 4-2. And this Reds team, another typical 6 seed, probably shouldn't really be there, but got some help. We'll talk about the Mets in a second. They got some help, snuck their way in. And, I mean, you could say they're playing good baseball, but this week they lost the series to the Pirates. If they won that series, they would have clinched the 6th seed on Friday rather than doing it on Sunday. So you can say they're playing well, but they lost to the Brewers. It's just like it's not that they're not playing well. They're not winning a lot of baseball games right now.
Yeah, and I think you said it there with, the whole 6th seed thing. We see this every year. They have them and the Guardians have that kind of, team that no one expects to be in the playoffs, kind of get hot at the right time and then make a run. They have those are the teams that everyone's going to be looking at this year to be able to make that run, because ever since, the new format has come in for the MLB playoffs, that's happened every year. But yeah, I think I agree with what you said. I think the Phillies match up good against both teams. The Dodgers obviously have a really bad bullpen. Their lineup's good. Their pitching staff is pretty decent. But, I mean, like Ohtani, I don't know how long he's going to pitch even in the playoffs. And, there's talk about him going to the outfield so that way he can still DH. And there's a bunch of stuff going on there. But, the Reds, I like their pitching staff, but their lineup just doesn't scare me. And, that could obviously come back to bite us. But their lineup just doesn't really scare me. And, I think the Dodgers are going to win this series, and I think we're going to be playing LA. But, with the way that these playoffs have gone, you never know really what's going to happen with these wild card series. And, it's going to be a fun one to watch. And even though it starts at 9 o'clock, and we'll be watching all the games, and, it'll definitely be it's good for the Dodgers, obviously, being at home, being in LA, being on the West Coast time, and, being able to kind of set their rotation a little bit, because they've obviously known they've been in the playoffs for a while. But, like you said, the Reds, they've had a good month, but, with how bad the Mets have been playing, they also kind of backed in a little bit. It almost seemed like nobody really wanted to get that last spot. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes, but I do think that the Dodgers will probably win this series.
Hunter Green is expected to start game 1 for the Reds. Yeah. Blake Snell is, according to Dave Roberts, a good bet to start game 1 for the Dodgers. Game 2 will likely be Yoshinobu Yamamoto against Nick Lodolo. So certainly game 2, Dodgers have the upper hand. In game 3, it could be Ohtani for the Dodgers. Okay. We'll see how far he goes. Or if the Dodgers win in 2, he will go in game 1 against the Phillies at Citizens Bank Park for his first ever pitching appearance at CBP. So that'll be pretty fun. And the first time he went against the Phillies, he no-hit them through 5 innings. So
yeah,
whatever.
And the Phillies won the game.
Yeah, and the Phillies won the game hungover. So, just crazy stuff. That Dodgers bullpen, we'll see what they do with it. We could see Kershaw come out of the bullpen. Roki Sasaki's been moved to that bullpen, so it'll be a bit of a different look in the postseason. But that bullpen is so bad.
Yeah, and Ohtani, there's even been talk that Ohtani can go to the bullpen. I don't know how all the rules work with allowing him to hit and how he would, how that would work. But there's even been talks about him going to the bullpen to try to help it out. I mean, the fact that Roki Sasaki has gone out there, I mean, he was such a sought-after free agent coming out of the season, and he has just not lived up to the expectations. Obviously, it seems like he just has not been able to handle the pressure. There was, this stuff early in the season going on, and it's going to be interesting if the Phillies get to them, because that's a team that you've got to get their stars out quick and get into that bullpen, because it's really, really bad. And we think we have a bad bullpen. Well, they have a really, really bad bullpen, but they obviously won the World Series last year. Have really good players in that lineup, big time postseason players in that lineup as well. So they definitely would not be an easy NLDS matchup by any stretch of the imagination.
So if Ohtani becomes a relief pitcher, the Dodgers would lose their DH. So they would lose that designated hitter, and then Ohtani could go to the outfield.
So that's what they were talking about, moving to the outfield. Okay.
So if they have him in the bullpen, he pitches like the 7th inning, then he would have to go to the bullpen to stay as a pitcher or as a hitter in the game. So that could be kind of confusing and interesting how they plan to do that. let's talk about the Mets. The New York Mets have the second highest payroll in baseball. They had the best record in Major League Baseball through June 12th. They were 20 games over 500, $339 million payroll. They went 38-55 after June 12th. And the New York Mets are out of the postseason. It's a beautiful thing. Like, watching the Mets lose today made me more happy than watching the Phillies win. Like, it is just such a great thing. They get destroyed by the Marlins this weekend. The Mets took one game from them, but the Marlins, they changed their pitching staff. They changed their rotation so they could have their best guys go against the Mets. It just all aligned, and it was poetry. It was beautiful. It was great. I love watching the Mets lose.
Yeah, it's amazing. They have the biggest game of their season, and they don't score any runs. And yeah, they've just been an absolute train wreck. It's kind of like how the Phillies were last year, where they just got out so hot in the beginning of the season, but the Mets weren't able to stable the ship at all. I feel like the only good time baseball that they played is when the Phillies went up there the last time from the season, but then obviously they came down here and got their butts kicked. So yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome to watch it. Juan Soto is more concerned about having his 40-40 season than actually making the playoffs, and that there's obviously been some criticism around him. And Pete Alonso, I saw one of my Mets friends. I haven't seen it myself, but one of my Mets friends said that he said in the post-game interview that he's going to test free agency. So again, I'm not 100% on that, but my Mets friend said that. So that's something to keep an eye on there. So yeah, it's pretty crazy how kind of their season just fell off a cliff. And it started out, like you said, it started out amazing. They were looking really good, and their pitching staff was like playing out of their minds, and their home road splits were crazy. But I think that really came back to bite them, because they could not play good baseball on the road for whatever reason whatever reason that was. They just did not play good baseball on the road, and it just came back to bite them in the
end. Could it be because the Mets were cheating? Maybe.
I'm not gonna say anything.
I mean, they were definitely crazy. The home, they were 49-32 at home, 34-47 on the road. So not kind of a little fishy. If you want to be one of those guys, they have the camera out there. Maybe it was the microphone they had out in center field that was blinding Alec Bohm.
Alec Bohm was justified all along.
Alec Bohm was right. But yeah, so Pete Alonso opting out of his Mets deal, which is, you lose the game, you immediately hear, I'm going to go test free agency. I'm sure that's what Mets really wanted to hear. But when you pay a guy $700 million and you don't do anything else, this is what you get. You get like not a great pitching staff. You get an offense that is super top heavy and then really falls off. And when your top guys aren't going, no one else is.
Well, yeah, some of their guys just didn't have great years. I mean, Vientos obviously had an amazing year last year, but he kind of struggled this year. I mean, Alvarez, I talked about him earlier with that at bat to Duran, but he's a nothing at the plate. And Lindor's obviously always going to be good, but he didn't have quite as good of a year as he did last year. And then obviously Soto had a good year individually, but he still struggles at times, struggles in the outfield and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely a good sight to see that the Mets missed the playoffs today. And I wasn't really afraid of them coming into the year just because how bad they were playing. I think that we would have handled them pretty easily. But at least we don't have to travel up to Citi Field and kind of don't have to worry about that in a NLDS series anymore.
Yeah, it at least fills me with confidence, because if we had to go back to Citi Field, I was not good, because if you lose one game at home, it's really not a great feeling. But anyway, speaking of the Phillies, they won't have to play the Mets. They might play they either play the Reds or the Dodgers. And their roster, they have to cut two guys. Who are they going to be, and could it really just be the two guys that they brought up in September?
Yeah, I mean, it makes the most sense. Obviously, Stubby is the vibes officer, the chief vibes officer, and he's going to, be celebrated. He wants to celebrate with every postseason win, but they just don't need him. Like they just don't need him. And I think something that's interesting is there's been some talk between some Phillies beat writers about the possibility of bringing Rojas back up for the playoffs to be a pinch runner. I don't know. I don't know what you think about that. I mean, it makes sense just from just to be a pinch running standpoint, but I don't trust him at all. Obviously, I don't trust him to hit, but I don't. I'm very torn on if I would want him to come up, but I agree with you. They're probably just going to send back the 2 September call-ups. But yeah, what do you think about if they were to bring Rojas up to pinch run?
Personally, in my notes here, I have Rojas coming back to pinch run. I think you need, because there's so many different situations you can be in the playoffs. Like if Kyle Schwarber hits a double in the bottom of the 9th inning, and you can get a guy out there with so much more speed that will give you a better chance to win the game, you're going to do that. So if you have a speedster like Rojas that you can use, he doesn't need to play the outfield. You have someone else that can go in the outfield and be better defensively. You have someone that can hit in place of him. He doesn't need to hit. If Yohan Rojas gets in that bat in the playoffs, something is going terribly wrong. But if you have the option to use a speedster like him on the base pass late in a game situation, you should take it. It doesn't hurt to have a guy that's fast on the bases, obviously. So I think bringing Rojas back onto this roster is the correct move. So I have Tim Meza being cut from the bullpen. I have Stubbs being cut. And just because Garrett Stubbs is being cut doesn't mean he can't stay in the clubhouse. He can still vibe with the guys. He just can't play. He just can't wear a uniform. And I have Weston Wilson being cut as well. I like the possibility of Weston maybe getting some pitch hitting opportunities. He seems to always come through in certain points with his power. But I think Otto Kemp is much more suited to do better than Weston Wilson.
I agree. I would definitely keep Kemp, especially with, obviously nobody loves him over at third base, but if Boone were to get injured again, obviously he's kind of been, he's just coming back off the IL there, but I don't know. I hear you saying about the Rojas thing, and I do agree with you that we do need speed on the bases, but I think I don't like the idea of Thompson having the option of Rojas in a lefty-lefty situation with Brandon Marsh batting, because I don't know why, but I just have it in my head that if Rojas comes up and then there's a tough lefty on the mound with in the 8th inning, Brandon Marsh is coming to bat, that Thompson's going to pinch hit Brandon Marsh for Yohan Rojas in that situation, and I do not want that to happen at all. So if you could tell me that Yohan Rojas is not allowed to hit and he's only allowed to run on the bases when he gets called up, I'm 100% with you. But again, I don't know, for whatever reason, I just have a feeling because of all the platoon stuff that we do and the last couple of years of where I thought that Marsh should get a bat over Rojas that he didn't. I just have that fear in the back of my head that Thompson would use him in a situation that he shouldn't. But I agree with you that if he's only up here in that situation of 10th inning, we need a pinch runner to be on second base, or like you said, Schwarber gets a big hit and you need somebody to run, then I'm all for it. But he cannot get in that bat in the playoffs. He just can't.
Oh, if he does, something's going terribly wrong. Where the last couple, we've seen some lefties, and Marsh isn't always playing against lefties. We've seen Weston Wilson out there, and if they leave Weston Wilson off the roster, it feels like Marshall will just be the full-time left fielder in the postseason, which is why they could keep Wilson there over Otto Kemp or over Rojas, just due to the fact that he's started more games in left field and can be a platoon option, or you could just do Otto Kemp in that situation. Wilson adds a bit more power than Kemp does, but Kemp always seems to get on base. So different ways you can go with it. But, if Rojas is getting at bats over Edmundo Sosa or Otto Kemp or, at this point, Rafael Marshall, over anybody, I don't know what I would rather have Kevin Long out there getting that bat than Rojas.
I wasn't thinking about the Kemp of it all because I do think that obviously is an added right-handed bat that we haven't had over the last few years. So that's a good point there about Kemp. I wasn't factoring him in. He obviously would get the at bat over Rojas, but yeah, it's just I don't know. I think we'll see obviously what they do, but definitely definitely, I think, like you said, Stubbs and Meza are probably going to be the two guys that are gone. And then, yeah, I think it will be an interesting decision between Weston Wilson and Otto Kemp. I agree with you that it should be Otto, but we will see if they do bring a Rojas up.
Yeah, hopefully it won't matter too much in the wild
Yeah,
card.
true. If we're like you said, if we're discussing these guys too much, or if we're having big Otto Kemp or Weston Wilson at bats, or God forbid Rojas or any of these bench player at bats, then something is going really wrong. So
Yeah, something's going wrong. And another thing, this Game 4 starter that everyone is fantasizing about a little bit. Hopefully, we won't even need one until the NLCS. But you got the day off after Game 1. You got another day off after Game 2. So that's a while where Christopher Sanchez could be ready to go by Game 4 if needed. And I feel like Aaron Nola is the correct option. He's been bad over the last year. However, his last start has me feeling pretty good. I'm back on the Nola train. 8 innings, 2 hits, 1 run, 9 strikeouts against the Twins on Friday. 5 perfect innings like that got me feeling pretty good again about Aaron Nola. And he's got the most experience in the postseason out of everybody.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Nola's the correct option. While I don't feel great about it, I do think that he's the guy that they should and will go to. But at the same time, I think that you have to have Walker Buehler ready. And I think the biggest reason why I would go Nola over Buehler, because obviously they've both had great postseason success. Buehler obviously has had more than Nola, but Nola has also been a good postseason pitcher. But Buehler has come out of the bullpen in the playoffs before, where Nola obviously has not. So while I'm not 100% confident in Aaron Nola getting a postseason start at this point, just the way that his season has gone, even with his last start, I trust Walker Buehler to be able to come in out of a bullpen if Nola does his thing and, has a 4-run first inning. Walker Buehler, I would trust a lot more to come in instead of the other way around where Buehler starts a game, doesn't pitch well, and then you have to have Nola come out of the bullpen. Like, that just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think, I agree with you. Should and will be Nola, and then they'll probably just piggyback him with Buehler either way. Even if he pitches well, obviously they'll let him go. But if there needs to be a quick hook, it'll be Buehler.
And then this lineup thing, Trey Turner confirmed to be the leadoff hitter in the playoffs, as Rob Thompson says. So we'll see Trey lead off, and then it kind of fizzles out from there. Trey, Schwarber, Bryce, Bomer, JT at 4. You can kind of flip flop those two guys. Marsh up there, Bader up there as well, and then you got guys like Kepler and Stott and whoever else down towards the bottom of your lineup. It's going to be the same lineup as it always is.
So I have a. This is something I've believed for a little while, and it's something that I think that they should do with the lineup. I know they're never going to do it, but if I were making a lineup, I would make the top 4. Even though they're, like I said, they're never going to do this, but I would make personally the top 4: Turner, Bader, Harper, Schwarber, because for the last couple of years, we just have not had that protection behind Bryce Harper, and obviously Bryce is able to protect Schwarber now with Schwarber being in the 2-hole, but we just have never had that person behind Bryce Harper to be able to protect him and make the pitchers think about throwing him some strikes in the postseason. I mean, last year against the Mets, we saw the Mets just barely even pitch to him because they had no faith. They knew that they could get the guy right behind him out. And, Bohm obviously has done pretty well these last couple of weeks. He's not a power threat, even though he's hit a couple of home runs the last couple of days. But, he's not a huge power threat. And I just think having the protection behind Bryce would just, and also lengthens the lineup out a little bit more, I think. And, Bader was obviously doing a decent job as the leadoff hitter, and he hasn't been doing as great this past week. But, for the most part, he's been doing a good job as a leadoff hitter. I think he's somebody, obviously, who can still get on base in that 2-hole behind Trey. And, I also think, too, the whole, righty-lefty thing that Thompson wants to do because he's worried about a left-handed reliever coming in a late inning and being able to just run through these lefties. It doesn't matter with Schwarber. Schwarber set a record for most home runs off of left-handed pitching by a left-handed pitcher. So, that whole thing of being worried about having a left-handed reliever come in and just kind of take these guys out, doesn't apply to Schwarber. So they're never going to do it. I know they're never going to do it. But if it was my perfect world, I think the lineup makes a lot more sense if you start Turner, Bader, Harper, Schwarber.
Then you don't have protection for Schwarber. So why would you pitch to him when you can just go to Bohm, who is horrible in the postseason?
Well, there's always going to be somebody that you're not going to have protection for, but also it can, in the first inning you can get a few more guys. I know that's the problem, is that no matter what, their lineup's not deep enough to be able to protect whoever's, hitting in that 3 or 4 hole. But I don't know. I just think that I would love to see what having a true 4-hitter behind Bryce Harper would do. And I think this is something to look for, going into next season, not Schwarber batting 4th, but I think me wanting to put Schwarber 4th is more of just the constant want from me to have somebody, a true 4-hitter, hit behind Bryce Harper, because we've never really had that. We've never had that guy who's been behind Bryce Harper who can just come in and hit home runs and, be that traditional, Ryan Howard type who's hitting behind Chase Utley. Like, we've just never had that, and I've always really wanted that. I've always really wanted to see if that would make, pitchers pitch to Bryce a little bit more. So, maybe Schwarber's not the right guy to do it, but maybe it's next year thing they can find somebody. But yeah, they're not going to do it, so it doesn't matter. But I would just love to see what it would look like.
Or what about a Trey Harper Schwarber?
Well, that's the ideal. But the problem is they're never going to pit. They're never going to put Bryce at 2. They're just never going to do it. And if you had to have your perfect world, that's the lineup, and it's always just been the lineup ever since these last couple of years. But Bryce just will not move off that 3 spot, and it's really weird because in 2022 he batted 4th in the playoffs. He batted 3 all year.
Always think about that.
But he moved to 4th. He moved to the 4th hole in the playoffs because it was what was best for the team. And what's best for the team, you said, is for him to to bat to. I mean, again, you're still going to have who's going to protect Schwarber, but yeah, having all of those guys lined up that way, I don't know, but they're not going to change it, so it doesn't matter. But I would just really love to see what it would be like if we had a real power threat to back up Bryce.
It's fun to dream, and this schedule that I'm about to pull up for those who can see it, who are watching the video YouTube version. Here is your wild card schedule. So you got games from 1:08 to, I guess, basically 12 o'clock. So in the morning. So you got a long day of baseball over Tuesday and Wednesday and possibly Thursday. Kicks off in Cleveland between Detroit and the Guardians at 1 o'clock, and then you got the Padres and Cubs at Wrigley Field at 3:08. You got Red Sox, Yankees at Yankee Stadium at 6, and then you got Reds, Dodgers, the one that matters, at 9:08 in Los Angeles. Let's go series by series, Sam. What are we thinking? Tigers, Guardians. This is going to be a really fun series in Cleveland.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun. Obviously, the Guardians chased down Cleveland, the Guardians chased down Detroit to be able to get this number 3 seed, which is pretty crazy. Side note, if I was a fan of either or 2 of these teams, I would be so mad that all my 3 of my games are at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Are you kidding me? Like, how are people supposed to watch these games? This is something I've had a gripe with the MLB playoffs for years, is that they put playoff games during the day. They're the only sport that puts playoff baseball during the workday. Like, MLB has done so many good things over the last couple of years to be able to bring more eyes to the game, but the fact that you have workday based playoff baseball games has just always been crazy to me. But
you can have a game on. Sorry, but you can have a 6 o'clock. You can have 2 7 o'clock games going on. You can have one on ABC and one on ESPN. Like, Disney has the right. You can do. They got ESPN and so many channels. You got ESPN2. You got ESPNU. You got so many ESPN. Charles Barkley makes the joke all the time that they're going to go on ESPN Deportes. There's so many ESPN channels that you can use. Utilize them.
The NBA plays all the playoff series at the same time, and guess what? It's okay. People still watch the games. Like, it's ridiculous. But going back to what you actually asked, I think that I like the Guardians in the series. I just think that they're one of those teams that come in really hot. They have the home field advantage, obviously, and the Tigers have just been absolutely reeling. The Tigers obviously had a great regular season to start, and then just have really collapsed. And they have Scooble obviously, but I think that the Guardians are going to keep riding the high they've been on, and they're going to win this series.
Juan Duran broke the Detroit Tigers, is what people are. It's what the streets are saying. So I'm going to go with Cleveland in 2. I think this is a really competitive series, but I think the Guardians just come out of both games with like tight victories, and it's good like small ball AL Central baseball in Cleveland. I think it's going to be another fun series. Another one that's going to be fun. Two kind of high flying teams. You got the San Diego and Chicago at Wrigley Field. Another 3:08 versus 2:08 first pitch in Chicago. So another afternoon game for you. Watch out for those shadows in Chicago. The Phillies have had their stuff with those shadows, so now we'll have those in Chicago. What do you think? Padres Cubs, fun series.
Yeah, this one's really good. I think that this one's probably going to go to 3. Man, this is a really tough one to pick. I like the Padres. I just think that they have the playoff experience over the Cubs, even though some of these guys, some of the guys are new there, but guys like Machado and that kind of stuff, they have the playoff experience. I think it's going to be a 3-game series, like I said, but I like the Padres to come out of there.
Yeah, I also like the Padres in 3. It's hard to win in Chicago, but I think San Diego pulls this one out. It's not going to be too cold in Chicago either, so no real crazy testing by the Padres. So that one's on ABC. So that one's on the main ABC channel. And then we go back, and then what's going to happen if Red Sox Yankees plays over past 9:00? What are they going to do? You got to go to ESPN 2. But yeah, Red Sox Yankees at Yankee Stadium. This is what you dream of. 6:08. What a great start time. What do we think in the Bronx?
Yeah, this is an exciting series. I think, the last couple of years, the Red Sox Yankees always being on Sunday Night Baseball, the rivalry, it's been overplayed a little bit, but I think that a playoff series is something that can really renew it. That being said, I like the Yankees in this series. I do think that this one's actually going to go 3. Yankees have been struggling a little bit down the stretch. Red Sox obviously got really hot. It was looking like they were not going to make the playoffs, and then they were able to sneak in. So good for them getting in, but I do like the Yankees in 3 in this one.
I'm going with the Yankees in 3 as well. It's not easy to win Yankee Stadium games in Yankee Stadium in the postseason. But we haven't had a true Red Sox Yankees series in a while. We had the Red Sox Yankees wild card game a couple years ago, but now we got a full series, so that'll be it's always fun. As a Phillies fan that hates both teams, it's always fun to see one of these teams lose. And then the ones that matter. In Los Angeles, you got the Red Hot Reds against the other Dodgers team that's been playing well recently. 9:08, 6:08 start time in LA. Also, what's with the 08? That's like a weird.
Yeah, that's really weird. I don't know.
Why don't just do 10? Like add another 2 minutes of commercials. Who cares? Reds Dodgers. Who are the Phillies going to be playing?
Yeah, so this one I think is going to be the Dodgers. I said that earlier. I think the Dodgers are going to win this in 2, although I will say I think that this one is the most upsettable series. I think that if any team was going to upset, I think it would be the Reds, just because of not because I think the Reds are the better team, but just because that's just the way of the land with the wild card these last couple of years. We know one of these lower seeds is going to win. They got hot coming in, and they're going to keep riding that momentum, and they're going to be a scary team to face, even though they might not be as talented. So, of all the lower seeds winning, of all the lower seeds to win, I think it could be the Reds, but I still think the Dodgers are the better team, so I'm going to pick the Dodgers.
Of every time we've had the 6th seed in the postseason, the 3 seed in the NL has lost the wild card every single time. The Cardinals, Brewers twice, and now maybe the Dodgers. So we'll see. I think the Dodgers win in 2. They're just too good, and we all know who the Dodgers are. They're the reigning champs. So I think the Dodgers will take that one out, and the Phillies will be hosting LA later this week on Sunday or Saturday. When that will take place.
Are you going to see any playoff games that you know of yet?
Not that I know of yet. So we'll see. I mean, I hope so. It'll be fun. So we'll see what happens there. You got any on deck?
Not yet. I have, I really want to go. My girlfriend's never been. I've been to a lot without her, and she was always working. So now she has a normal job schedule. She could actually make the games. So she's trying to get me to get us some tickets. So we'll see how that goes. I know, maybe we could use a code that sponsors this show. But hopefully, because obviously, I didn't get to go last year. I went in 23 and 22, but didn't get to go to a game last year. So would really love to, and hopefully we can make it work. Hopefully, submitted the thing for the lottery last week. Maybe we get in there somehow. I don't know. We'll have to see, but yeah, definitely planning on going to at least one game.
That's definitely the way to go. You get your face value tickets, but I mean, you could save some money with some certain code on SeatGeek. That code is Phillies Sports Report. SeatGeek. We all know who they are. They're the best. They sponsor this show. Use code Philly Sports Report. Save $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. PhillysSportsReport. Hold the S. Philly Sports Report on SeatGeek. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring the show. And thank you for listening to the Bell Ringers podcast. Sam, thank you for filling in for Colin. I don't know where he's at, but we got Sam able to fill in, so we appreciate that. Thank you all for watching and listening. Make sure you go follow the Bell Ringers podcast on Twitter and follow Sam and I. And yeah, drop a follow for Colin on social media as well, and also the Philly Sports Reports. Go check those out. Thank you to SeatGeek again. Thank you to you. We will see you after the Reds-Dodgers wild card series, and we'll see who the Phillies are up in the NLDS.